Welcome again to the Cannabis Investing Podcast, where we speak with C-level executives, scientists, and law and sector experts to provide actionable investment insight in the context with which to understand the burgeoning cannabis industry. I'm your host, Rena Sherbal. Kim, welcome back to the Cannabis Investing Podcast. Been a while, but really happy to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And I think the pleasure of our audience who always wants to hear from Trulieve, from Kim. I think a lot of people, investors specifically, look up to you as somebody in the industry that's done it their way to start with, and then have a lot of copycats. And I think we've been telling that story a little bit, but catch listeners up for maybe those new to the Trulieve story, and maybe those following along kind of update us with where you sit as CEO, how you see it.
Yeah, it has been just an amazing journey so far, to say the least. We got our start back in 2015. With our first license win in the state of Florida. I have had the pleasure of being not only CEO, but also chairman of the board and also co-founder. And so I've been along for the ride since we were at 10 employees. We're just crossed the 9,000 employee threshold. As I mentioned, we started in Florida. Now, of course, we're a true multi-state operator with 11 states and over 3.5 million square feet of cultivation and production, and well over 160 stores. So it's been quite the journey. We have taken a bit of a different philosophical approach, as you mentioned, in that it was very important for us to build a company with an eye on financial stability from the very beginning, and really with a focus on building customer relationships. We focus very deeply on customer loyalty and fostering repeat customer transactions across our markets. We went very deep in Florida, and it was very contrary to, I guess, the time, if you will, when folks were really in a land grab, and the most common business plan was to go wide and shallow as opposed to more narrow and deep. And we set out to build the company differently, and we wanted to prove out that really to have a total addressable market, you actually had to provide a true access in a market. And so we did that with Florida, with, again, expanding our reach across the state of Florida and showing that we could develop a portfolio of products, as well as, again, relationships with customers across the state. We have over 50% market share, which we've enjoyed since our founding in Florida. And it wasn't until we felt secure that we had proved out that business thesis before we really took on expansion in a meaningful way. We certainly did that very thoughtfully. We wanted to lead with strategy. And so we developed a hub strategy that really speaks to our ability to achieve scale and penetrate across regional hubs, given the specific requirements from state to state, which may not allow us to expand in the same way that we did in Florida and other markets. And so we successfully ventured into the Northeast. And then most recently, of course, with our closing of Harvest in just under 5 months, we expanded that portfolio into the Southwest as well. And so we talk about the Southwest, the Northeast, and the Southeast as our key hubs, and our cornerstone markets within those hubs are Florida, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And so really, as I sit here today, again, having the pleasure of leading this incredible team and this incredible company, I've never been more excited in terms of our future and the foundation that we're continuing to build in this very exciting, very robust and complex industry.
So something that you mentioned in your latest investor presentation was how Trulieve is the number one MSO, the number one multi-state operator in terms of cultivation and retail. You're also, I remember talking to you the first time, we were talking about how you were one of the first companies to be profitable in the space. And also speaking to your presence, your first mover advantage in Florida and how successful Trulieve has been there, talking about those high margins. And then as you mentioned, kind of moving beyond that state, how are you, first of all, it's a different sector that we're looking at than it was in those halcyon days of late 20. How are you thinking about it now? And as you're looking to expand, how do you keep that profitability? How do you keep those high margins as you move to expand?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that again, it starts and ends with the customer, and so I think that the primary focus for us has and always will be providing the absolute best customer experience, and the reason I lead with that is because I think that if you drift away from that, we can talk about financial metrics, we can talk about profitability, but again, it really is so key to have that customer experience in mind, because that's what truly creates a durable business. And those relationships with that customer that are, again, repeat in nature, the ability to develop deep, loyal relationships are 100% what will continue to make us profitable, right? Will continue to fuel our growth. So I think first of all, again, having that financial discipline as a key strategy that and a muscle that we've continuously exercised is really important. I think that, oftentimes folks make the assumption that with expansion, those things are mutually exclusive. And we don't believe that to be true at all. And certainly as part of our analysis, when we approach markets, that certainly is a key component of what we look at. Of course, when we absorb a business like Harvest, who had some financial, it was in a very different financial position than we were. And quite frankly, that's to be expected. That's why we were able to reach a deal, and that's why we were able to close the transaction. We saw and continue to see a lot of opportunity to continue to right size that business. Quite frankly, they had done an amazing job of getting that business back on track. They were the first operator to have rec sales in the state of Arizona. I think a lot of folks were very surprised when their Q1 2021 results came out, and then similarly in Q2 with respect to how they had substantially turned that company around, not only from a top line perspective, but also from a bottom line perspective. There's more work to be done. So we know, for example, that in the markets that we operate in, having supply chain control is very important. It's very important, again, from that customer perspective, because we're able to control the quality of the product. But then, of course, it's also very important from a margin perspective and a profitability perspective. And so one of our key initiatives across markets that we've acquired in 2022 will be to ensure that we've got supply chain control and expansion where appropriate in those key markets. Certainly Arizona is a market that you'll see investment from us in supply chain. You'll see continued branded products through branded retail. That's one of our key kind of rallying cries, if you will, internally into 2022. Same in Pennsylvania. We have 3 different businesses that we're amalgamating in Pennsylvania, right? As a reminder, we entered that market through M&A, through a cultivation and processor. We added some retail through affiliated retail licenses, and then of course with the Harvest portfolio of affiliated licenses, both in retail and cultivation. So it's a bit of a three-part puzzle in Pennsylvania. I was just in market in Pennsylvania yesterday, spending a whole day with that team, and so really fired up again about what we can do there to again get branded product through branded retail. What that also does is it insulates us from external situations in each market. It allows us to be more in control of our own fate, and again, really have a better and more robust line to that customer as we continue to develop those relationships. So we've got a fantastic suite of products with both the Trulieve House of Brands and the Harvest House of Brands coming together. We know that our products can be properly positioned in our stores, and that we'll see accelerated throughput. And right now, it's really all about getting those products on shelves. So I think that we've got a great plan. Now we just have to execute against it. And if there's one thing that this team loves to do, it's to execute. So again, I've never been more excited in terms of how I believe we're going to be looking in the back half of 2022 as and to be fair, it is going to take, I don't want to mislead folks, it's going to take a couple quarters for us to get that, because we're talking about supply chain moves here, but it's very doable. It's very, the plan's on the board. And so we look forward to rolling it out across 22. So I think that we're going to surprise folks in terms of what we can prove out and what we can do at scale across multiple markets. And I don't think that it's an either or. I don't think that it's a case that you either, that you can't be in multiple markets. And if you are, that you're sacrificing, margin as kind of a point of truth. We're out to prove that wrong.
So let me ask you a question because you mentioned at the top, how it took truly 5 months to close the Harvest deal. And I would say that's a real point of bragging rights because we're looking left and right at deals that aren't going through, at deals that are ending in arbitration, and all of these kinds of misses on things that look so promising. And it seems to me with all this consolidation across the sector, one of the key things and something that I try to talk to a lot of people about is this merging of cultures. And it seems to me that that's something that is really, really difficult to do. And it's easy to say, yeah, we're focused on this. And yeah, but it's quite another thing to actually actualize that.
Yep.
So how do you go about that? What's your vision as CEO, and how do you ensure that that's implemented in the right ways?
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's always right, a big consideration, and quite frankly, a risk whenever you do an acquisition. And by the way, it doesn't matter the size.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a risk when we're looking at 3 stores in Pennsylvania, as much as it is in when we're looking at a company as large as Harvest. And so our approach is fairly practical in nature. One, which you saw from us, it's to get the dang thing closed. Okay, folks don't like uncertainty. As humans, we're not built, most of us anyway, aren't built for uncertainty. And certainly when it comes to our careers, right, and what we're going to be doing day in and day out, and we spend so much time at work. And so it was important, and then to create alignment along the way. And folks may have heard me talk about that, but when Steve White and I, our very first conversation around a possible transaction involved a conversation around alignment, and basically a promise to one another that if anytime during the process, if either one of us felt that we were getting out of touch or out of alignment, and we were starting to have some difficulties, which by the way can happen. That can happen, particularly when you're going through diligence and you're finalizing negotiations and dealing with the DOJ, et cetera. That either one of us could call the deal, and we had that agreement between the two of us. And what that did was that it encouraged over communication among our executive teams early, and we were able to set tone from the top that we were collaborative, we were working together, and we were trying to bring people along with us as we move towards closing. The second thing is get the deal closed fast so that then you can communicate as a single point and single organization into Q4. And Q4 is super important for us because that's when we do all of our strategic goal setting, our budgeting process, and we have our executive alignment retreat with our board. And so I really wanted, and Steve and I really wanted, folks that were key employees at Harvest to really meaningfully participate and help shape the future of our combined company. And so being able to message that, and then for them to see us put that in action, because you can talk all you want, as you know, but it's really folks want to see it. And then really it's that continuation. We made sure that every single person at Harvest had a personal conversation about what the transaction meant to them, how, if any changes were going to be made, what they could expect, who their point of contact was. And that happened day one. And it was a massive undertaking from a communications perspective, but it was really important. And I mean, I think that as we sit here and look and see the success that we've had in terms of the lack of attrition across the organization, I'm really proud of our team and of our combined teams, because it does take, on the other side of the table, folks having some trust and faith that you're going to do the right thing, and that this is a company that they're at least going to give the benefit of the doubt to, right? Particularly in today's work environment, and the opportunities that exist, not just in cannabis but outside of cannabis as well. And so and then I think it's just continued communication. I was in market this whole first part of the week. I'm back in Arizona next week, making sure that you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk. I'm having a series of listening sessions and dinners and whatnot, and our entire exec team is expected to do that as well. And so I think we have to lead from the front and encourage folks to, as I say, one of our mantras is use your voice, right? Make sure that communication isn't just one way, but that it's actually a true conversation between folks, and make sure that we've got the opportunity in front of folks and the goals in front of them, and that they know that they're meaningful contributors to the future success of our combined company, and that the future is bright and we want them to be a part of it.
In terms of your leadership style, because like what you just said is really impressive. As an employee of a company, I think all anybody wants is to feel heard and to feel respected. And if you're going in and asking questions and enabling people to feel that way, I think, as an employee, you really can't ask for much more. Maybe good pay, but I'm sure that's been taken care of too. But what's something kind of that has served you coming into this role? Has it been your own experience that's led you to this philosophy? Has it been looking at other people? Has it been mentors? How have you kind of gotten to this point?
Oh my gosh, all of the above, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's really a combination. I think that look, I mean, the number one rule is treat other people like you want to be treated, right? And I mean, I think that I literally just got off of a call before this interview, and I mean, my one thing after being in market the last couple of days is that we need to do a better job of utilizing talent deep within the organization. And so we were talking about on this particular initiative we have coming up, pulling and actually putting folks in charge who are behind the counter right now at some of our stores, right? Folks that have that real customer facing experience day in and day out. How can we better, right, utilize their energy, their knowledge, their know-how, and strategically within the organization? So I think continuing to challenge that kind of inertia, if you will, as you become a larger organization. I'm kind of a bit anti-hierarchy. I always have been. We built this organization very flat. But the only way a flat organization works is if you have high levels of trust and high levels of cross collaboration and really high levels of communication. And so just continuing to challenge and continuing to ask our teams, my team, what else we could be doing. And I think that it invigorates folks though, right? So, we pulled actually a more, a store manager who's a rock star in Maryland into a meeting ad hoc yesterday. And I mean, the energy in the room was just palpable, right? When she got on the line and was giving us her, suggestions and feedback. And so I think that, as leaders, we sometimes get into a routine or a habit. And so I ask myself very regularly, and I learned this from a key mentor, right? Is that every couple of weeks, just step back and say, okay, who different have I talked to? Right, over the last couple of weeks, right? Am I just hearing the same voices? Am I just hearing the same inputs? Who different have I talked to? And if the answer is I haven't talked to anybody different, then that's a red flag and that's a light bulb. And we try to do that across our teams here.
Yeah, it's like a quarterback. You want to be passing to a bunch of different receivers. You don't want to just be locked into one person. Yeah. That makes good sense. The other thing I wanted to ask you that's somewhat similar, I feel like, and I know maybe some people that aren't familiar with you or Trulieve, especially kind of your social media presence, in terms of saying that you're public facing and focus on the customer. I feel like you really show that in terms of how public facing you are. Have you taken something from kind of customers and said like, oh, we're doing this wrong, or we could be doing this better, and change things based on
All
that?
the time, all the time, like literally all the time. I mean, it's that's one of my favorite parts of so I mean, it's so funny because people are like, oh, that's so, I don't know, some, of you to do that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I would do this all day, every day if I could, if I can't. But I mean, I think that when I sit back and I think I used to run our social media when we started, with 10 employees, and I did that for probably longer than I should, but I loved it because people will tell you if you're just willing to listen to them. And so there have been numerous examples across the years of folks making suggestions, customers making suggestions, and us taking that feedback and putting into practice. Certainly on product suggestions, if they've noticed a particular issue, like maybe we have a piece of hardware that has started to drift, right, from a quality perspective. So our ability to catch that really early and hold our vendors accountable and make sure that we're, again, providing that best and highest quality product back to folks. Early on, and I've told this story, but a Canna mom suggested that we needed to provide transparency of testing, which I said, yeah, we can do that. Why don't we do that? And so we're one of the only companies, and were for a while, that testing results for every single product specific to that product are available online. So folks can check, and if they're looking for a particular, for example, terpene compound or what have you, they can check and make sure that that product does have that requirement. Our no questions asked return policy came from customers who were frustrated that this was a cash transaction, and so how can they be assured that a product that is supposed to do X is doing X for them? And so that was something that was rolled out immediately as a result of feedback. So yeah, I mean, I would say that we are all the time looking to improve and all the time looking for customers, and are so appreciative when customers use their time and spend their time to give us feedback. So it's like I said, it's something I love to go to grand openings. I love to talk to customers because I think that we get that genuine feedback and we're able to authentically improve as a business.
I wanted to ask you, as you talk about expanding and you've kind of, owned some of the areas around Florida, if we talk about that as kind of leading to the southern part of the country, what's your take on that part of the country in terms of legalization and regulation, and what are you thinking in terms of like acceptance and progress there?
Yeah, I mean, I've said, I think that the Southeast is a huge frontier for cannabis. I think that it's going to follow a typical pattern that we saw in Florida. And you're starting to see that across other markets. Georgia is a great example. I mean, Alabama looks like it's going to be coming online here soon. Mississippi, there's another, attempt there, but it's coming from the legislature, which is great. So, it's going to lead with medical, certainly, and that's okay, right? I mean, I think that that's an important and really critical step. And to be blunt, right, there are a lot of folks out there who absolutely need cannabis. I mean, it's not an optional thing for them. They absolutely need cannabis to help and assist them in terms of quality of life and treatment while they're dealing with very serious medical conditions. So that's a human rights issue as far as I'm concerned. So I think absolutely that's appropriate for states to lead there. And then, right, what typically happens is then folks realize that the sky hasn't fallen, and it becomes just a story of personal experience and acceptance. And as much as you want to talk at people, and this is the same with products and branding and everything else, until someone has a firsthand experience or they know someone that has benefited, and really that does more than any interview or news article or anything else that we can do. Create fantastic products, make sure that they're consistent, give a great customer experience, and start letting folks speak for legalization from inside. And that's what we see across more conservative states. I've said over and over again that cannabis is not a red or blue issue. I mean, Florida is as red as you can get, and it's the third largest cannabis market in the country, and so it's just a matter of time. And I'm very, very encouraged and think that we will start to see significant change in the Southeast over the next couple of years as it relates to Trulieve's presence as well as others, and access to cannabis.
Yeah, I would say the red and blue thing is completely like a moot point at this point with Representative Mace. And I mean, Republicans really putting the Democrats to shame in terms of what they're putting out there. Which I want to ask you about, but first I want to ask you, speaking of going medical first, thoughts on Florida going legal?
Yeah, so in Florida, as I've said a number of times, it's going to likely need to be a ballot initiative. There's a whole process in Florida and that's, most folks don't realize that actually medical happened before a ballot initiative in a limited way. And Trulieve was actually licensed at the time that the ballot initiative for medical happened. We had, I want to say, like 17 stores already open at that point. And so once the ballot initiative, it became clear that a ballot initiative was happening on the medical side, the legislature decided to try and get in front of that from a structural perspective, and went ahead and put the laws in place in terms of how the program would be regulated prior to actually the ballot initiative passing, which is interesting. And that's a common theme in Florida in many areas, not just cannabis. And so what we may see, and I don't have, this is just just based on history, is that we may see a ballot initiative coming to fruition, and then the legislature deciding that they want to go ahead and begin implementation work or begin structural work ahead of that ballot initiative. So But I think that, you can't have a ballot initiative in an off cycle year. So, at this point we're at 2024 is what we would be looking at. And it is a big lift. I mean, I don't want to, in Florida, it's a big state. There are a lot of signatures that have to be, gotten, and it is going to be a significant effort. But I think that the likelihood is that you'll see some activity on that front. I know there are a couple of groups that are already working. So I think a 2024 effort is or will be underway.
And your thoughts about broader national legalization, legislative efforts? Are you disappointed? Are you feeling like, well, this is kind of what we expected in a cynical, realistic way? Where are your thoughts in terms of all this protracted legislation? I know I had you on like a couple years ago talking about safe banking and how it passed the House, and like here we still are.
Yeah, I know, right? So, what I would say is that it always, I feel like, especially with federal, and it's true on the state level as well, it always takes longer than we'd like it to. And so I think that I believe, and I believe sincerely that Congressman Perlmutter is going to go down swinging, doing everything that he possibly can and using all of his, built up political, capital to attempt to get safe banking across the finish line. I believe we have a real champion there. And I, along with other folks in the industry, all the way from, the smallest of operators to the largest, I would just use this opportunity to say thank you to him, because he really has been a true and dedicated champion of this issue. So I think that, you can't count that out when you've got someone who kind of doesn't have anything to lose, and they're, this is their one issue that they've got and that they're pushing for. I think certainly, obviously, Representative Mace helps, although that's where partisanship does come into play in terms of who's going to be able to, I guess, champion this, and given the leadership construct currently. I think that there certainly is pressure as we approach kind of the midpoint of the year. I've always said that, I think it's kind of if it doesn't happen by midpoint of the year, I think it's going to be a challenge with this Congress. So, I'm looking at the next 5 months with hope, but also with a dose of realism, right? That unfortunately we haven't been able to get off center, particularly it's just in the, in the Senate specifically. I do think that, on the positive, if I'm able to put on my, positive outlook hat, that the level of conversation and the level of, we just had Amazon, yesterday throw their support into the ring with respect to cannabis. We've got some larger funding, support coming in for lobbying efforts as well. And so I think that that's all positive, right? And that's all, incremental steps in the right direction. And I think that, there was a bit of over exuberance, and I think maybe a lack of understanding completely in terms of how long some of these things can take, and just sort of the political quagmire that we can find ourselves in when there are other issues. They don't govern in a vacuum, right? It's not like they show up to work every day and cannabis is the only thing that they have to talk about, right? Unlike our business. And so, that's just the reality of any sort of really sea change issue in this country. But so I'm hopefully optimistic that maybe we can see something before the midterms, but kind of remains to be seen.
Are you also of the opinion, and I know that it's a double-edged sword, I know, like, you're not making as much money because of these regulations. I know, like, social justice, if you believe in real justice, that whole there's many double-edged swords, but taking the kind of optimistic, business perspective, there's also something to be said that the longer federal legalization takes, the better it is for companies like Trulieve as they kind of build their presence and establish operating procedure. Do you think about, I know that that's probably not something that you want to hang your hat on, but is it something that kind of does give you some level of comfort with this delayed regulatory picture?
Look, my job as CEO is to make sure that we're continuing to run our business, and that our business plan should never be dependent on a factor that we can't control, which clearly, right, we can't control the actions of the federal government. That being said, I think it absolutely is a travesty that folks are still in prison over a plant, that there's so much inequity that has occurred as a result of the federal government and their behavior in the past as it relates to cannabis, and that it really is an urgent issue for those reasons. And look, again, as I said before, I mean, those are human rights issues, and those far outweigh and outstrip any sort of financial or company issues. I mean, that's point blank, hard stop. So, Trulieve is going to be able to survive as a company. We will, that is part of what we've done for the last 5 years. I mean, we're going to continue to do that. It's my responsibility to put us in the best position possible, given the current realities of our situation, which we're going to continue to do. But, what I would say is that I believe very, very wholeheartedly in a complete and diverse ecosystem for any industry, and cannabis is probably, I would say, more so than maybe other industries. And that requires, quite frankly, a landscape where not only large scale operators can flourish, but also that we have smaller businesses, we have niche businesses, we have businesses that are, single state, a couple states, and folks from all different walks of life that are leading those organizations and bringing their ideas and their objectives to the table. Because otherwise, right, it's going to be a very myopic industry, and that would be a shame. Particularly, like I said, given this country's history as it relates to cannabis.
Are you hopeful about the industry as you see it grow in terms of kind of accepting more and being more magnanimous? How do you feel about the progress?
I'm hopeful by nature. And so, and what I can say is that, I mean, the conversations that I get to have with, entrepreneurs, founders, folks that are working to establish businesses in this industry are incredibly inspiring. I think that unfortunately, and look, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and have started and invested in a lot of businesses over the years. And so, when I'm talking with those, whether it's in a mentor relationship or, at a conference or what have you, when I'm talking to those businesses, I can just, their plans are solid. The businesses make sense, right? They just hit the same roadblocks over and over again. And we don't have access to the traditional tools that I would normally, advise them to utilize. And they're just not available in cannabis, right? I can't tell a minority entrepreneur about, funding potentially available with the Small Business Administration. I can't, suggest, certain bank funding mechanisms that would otherwise be developed because their businesses are located in particular areas that, special, tax credits or other opportunities would be available to them. And so there's, even obviously when we talk about standardized business deductions and how, one can organize their business to have a lower tax rate to be able to again utilize those dollars and harness and invest it back into their businesses. And so that's what we're talking about here. I mean, we're not talking about, again, and I mean, just to reiterate, no one has ever suggested that cannabis should get special treatment or any sort of different access than any other business across this country. I mean, we are literally just asking to be treated the same. Oh, and by the way, if you need to put an excise tax on us or something like that, okay, fine. But open up the normal channels so that again, this ecosystem can be created, and that's not a big company issue, right? That's a small and mid-size and diversity issue and everything else. And so it does get frustrating when you're reduced to kind of sound bites, or you're not able to have a more robust conversation about the full picture. But I am encouraged that because there have been these delays, maybe again on the positive, is that more and more of that fullness in terms of what really the impact is has been coming to light, and hopefully is starting to resonate in a more specific way, across the halls of Congress. We've certainly been doing everything we can to make sure that they understand that this isn't a single impact issue. It affects a lot of folks, and in a very, very real way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the humanity level, it's just absolutely asinine that it's still we're still having to have this conversation.
Yep.
Kind of switching gears a little bit, but staying on kind of a macro level, I'm just curious, when you're thinking about plans or acquisitions, do you how much weight do you give to kind of the macro environment in terms of interest rates and things coming down the pike? Is that something that feeds into some of your decision making strategy?
I mean, cost of capital is always a consideration from where I sit, certainly. But what I can say is that, when we're thinking about expansion and when we're thinking about strategic acquisitions, it's again part of my responsibility to make sure that we're as well positioned as we possibly can be. And, thankfully, because of our financial discipline and because of our, stellar balance sheet, we have been able to, access different types of financing at attractive rates. And so that, the debt markets remain very much open to us. And we've seen those rates dramatically come down over time. We just closed, over $300 million at 8% flat with no OID, no warrants, no anything. And so we're in conversations now with mid-tier banks that are very interested and would love to bank cannabis businesses. And so some of them are considering getting in ahead of even potential federal reform. And so, we kind of see ourselves as trying to push the envelope and being that sort of canary in the coal mine, if you will, and to lead with, again, because we have been disciplined and our team has done such an amazing job over the years in putting us in this position, that, I can have a very specific and real conversation about credit and our credit worthiness with a traditional financial institution. And, they're salivating, wanting to figure out a way to have Trulieve in their loan portfolio. So we're going to continue to do that. And I think that going back to your question, that puts us in a position where we are comfortable expanding. Obviously, we'll remain opportunistic. One of the whole reasons that we developed this hub strategy is so that we can more easily and seamlessly integrate and absorb additional companies, additional acquisitions into that structure, and that we've got that leadership and that support, and again, that through that hub model, so that when we do decide to pull the trigger, that folds in really, really nicely, and we can continue to execute again on our plans in that hub via an expanded footprint.
So speaking to the investor side of things, as I alluded to, as we've mentioned, the extreme volatility that we've seen in across the sector, everybody's share price. Do you think what's going to kick it back up is catalyst based? Do you think it's going to be like the banks starting to lend? Do you think it's getting close to institutional investment, maybe an uplist? Or do you think it's as investors kind of get the sense and understand that announcements aren't going to save the day? It's, real business, just fundamentals, like in any other sector. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I mean, again, it's been interesting to watch kind of the equity markets. And I do think that there is a significant disconnect right now. I think we all do, between, fundamentals and share price. And I mean, look, I mean, I think I am the largest shareholder at Trulieve. So I get it. And I mean, I'm not happy about it either. I think that, again, it's in my job to make sure that we're continuing to execute, we're continuing to stay on plan and on target and doing what we said we were going to do, and make sure that, we're continuing to deliver from a results perspective, and communicating, right, having transparency around what's happening in the business. We certainly have seen movement on the macro side. Certainly, right, the current makeup of our folks that are able to invest is challenging sometimes, right? I think that our retail investors are fantastic, and I actually love retail investors because I think that they oftentimes understand and take the time to understand the company and what makes us tick, and oftentimes are also customers. So I think that that's incredibly valuable. We also, though, of course, don't have the benefit of necessarily large long-standing institutions that can kind of bolster, right, from a stability perspective, a stock. And so, and that's because those folks can invest right now, because we aren't listed on a NYSE or on a NASDAQ. And so I do think that is a key catalyst to ease volatility in the market for sure. I think that you're going to continue to see volatility, and it might be, volatility goes both ways. As a reminder, right? I mean, we tend to only talk about volatility when it's going one way. But right, I mean, the volatility that we saw to the positive, right, was as a result of federal announcement or federal change. And so I think that as those things become real, certainly we'll see volatility to the upside there potentially. But again, I mean, I think that until there's a fundamental shift in who can invest in our name and other names, I think you're likely going to continue to see some volatility in the space. By the way, I continue to believe that creates opportunity, and significant opportunity for folks who are able to invest now, because you are able to invest ahead of, right, those large institutions. And I mean, that's certainly how I've always looked at it as an individual shareholder. But I mean, what they say about the market, it's eventually, and at some point it will become all about fundamentals and all about results. And, we'll look forward to that day. And I'm confident that, Trulieve will be, a shining star as we're able to continue to do what we do and post stellar results.
Yeah, I mean, I big time agree. And something I try and really champion on the podcast is what a great opportunity we have as retail investors to get into the space right now. Do you feel like investors are paying attention to all the insider buying that's happening at Trulieve? Is that something that you get questions about?
I get questions from time to time, and I think that, we are, again, fortunate that we've got folks within the company who are huge believers in what we're doing and see, right, the opportunity as well. And so, and are very, very comfortable and confident in our growth trajectory. And so, we'll continue to look for opportunities, right, to enter where we see them.
So what would you say to investors that are looking at Trulieve in particular, or the cannabis sector in general, either already invested and scared and unsure, or wondering if they should be invested? What are your words of advice to those investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, right, it's important to, I always tell folks this, like, zoom out, right? Zoom out, remember that, I mean, when you just look at performance and true metrics over the years, right? I mean, we went public in September of 2018. Our IPO price was $6 Canadian. Okay, so, and we had, I think at that point, I remember exactly, but I want to say it was like 47, less than 50 stores. Basically a Florida company, 1,000 employees or something like that. And, where we are today, right? Again, from a fundamentals perspective, 11 states, leading market share in key markets across those states, with catalysts coming, with, recreational use potentially on the horizon for large parts of those populations. With, an organization that has built and led with strategy first, and continues to execute and deliver on what we say that we're going to do. As I said, market leader from a really every metric, from a cultivation, production, retail, employees, number of SKUs, et cetera. And we're gonna keep doing what we do, and ultimately, right, this has proven out time and time again in the markets that fundamentals matter and results matter. And, ultimately, it'll catch up. And so I know not everyone has the luxury of being able to, kind of set it and forget it. But again, if you zoom out and you kind of think about where we started and where we are now, if you're able to take that longer term view, I certainly, again, have never felt more confident about where we're headed. And I think, look, I mean, at some point, the rest of the country is gonna catch up.
Yeah, here's hoping. It definitely seems like something's got to give one way or the other. Looking at the sector kind of and the possibilities of growth, what are you most excited about in terms of this year or kind of, in the near term?
Yeah, I mean, I am really excited about, again, our future as a combined company. We are knee deep, elbows deep into all of our integration efforts. And again, you look at a potential deal, you identify what those opportunities are, and then now we get the pleasure of rolling up our sleeves and actually doing it. And so putting those plans into action is something that I'm super excited about into 22, because we're going to be able to see that needle move, right? So that's always exciting when you have and can produce tangible results with strategic shifts. And so as a leader, that's always very empowering, and for our folks, it's very empowering because they can see actually in the financial statements how they're affecting change. So that's exciting as we again work to get those businesses built out, and again contributing the way that we know that they can contribute on a combined basis. I'm very excited about our continued growth in our cornerstone markets. I'm also excited about the possibility of additional acquisitions as we think about opportunities into 22 and 23. So there's lots of exciting work to be done. That's very tactical and again execution based, as well as again future strategic growth on the horizon.
I want to ask you one question before I let you go, but I want to thank you for coming back to Seeking Alpha and sharing all the insights that you've shared. When you're leading the company, what's something that you feel like is hardest for you, or kind of the hardest thing to get over sometimes?
The hardest thing for me, gosh, it depends on the day. I would say, managing through exponential growth is never easy. And it's a blessing, right? Of course, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But certainly, this past year has been an interesting one because we had such incredible growth going through COVID. I mean, 26% Q over Q. I mean, just crazy top line growth, but it affected, and we had to change every aspect of how we were running our business in order to take advantage of that growth. And then it was sort of a whiplash scenario, right? Back into sort of the realities of a business that wasn't growing at the same rate, still growing, by the way, but coming off of that sort of big business change into a more normalized environment while dealing with the realities of the continuation of COVID, right? I mean, because we've all had a little bit of COVID fatigue, right? And so maintaining morale, managing through, and then we have harvest on top of that. And so I would just say, continuing to make sure that I and our teams are continuing to see the vision, continuing to remain, excited and, fired up about what we have ahead of us, and that we're bringing folks along, right? And we talked about that, but it's that's something that we have to work on every single day. And so I would say the hardest is that, what I lie awake about thinking is, am I doing everything that I can do as a leader to make sure that folks are encouraged, they're inspired, and that they feel and that they are truly, not just that they feel, but they are truly meaningful contributors to this journey. And just as you become a larger and larger organization, you have to make sure that you're really kind of circling back on those feedback loops on a more regular basis. But it's an exciting challenge, and like I said, I feel blessed every day that I get to sit in this chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that idea of staying aware of what the vision is in the first place, and like that clicking out and zooming out. I think also gives you, as you mentioned before, gives you the ability to do that. Good stuff, Kim. I really appreciate you coming on Seeking Alpha. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite, and look forward to talking to you again soon.